The standard deviation is the average difference between each of the data items and the mean. A sample of 10 students were given a timed arithmetic test, and the times in minutes to complete this test were as follows. We want to calculate the standard deviation. Well, our first step would be to find the mean. So I'm going to list the values. I'll call the values X in a column form. All right, to find the mean, I'm going to use this formula. That means to take that symbol means to add or take the sum of. So we're going to take the sum of the values and divide by n. N stands for the number of values. So if I add the finishing times, I get a sum of 100. Well, I had 10 finishing times, or finishing times from 10 students, so I get a mean of 10. Now, I want to find the average difference between each of these data items in 10. So our next step is to find those differences. Take each value and I'll subtract the mean. So I'll list the values again. From each of those values, I'm going to subtract 10 since that's the mean. Well, 10 minus 10, that's 0. There's no difference. 9 minutes was 1 below 10. 12 minutes is 2 minutes above 10. 11 is 1 above 10. 8 is 2 below 10. 15 is 5 above 10. 9 is 1 below 10. 7 is 3 below 10. 8 is 2 below 10. And 11 is 1 above 10. So what we're looking for is the average of these differences. So the next logical step would be to add these differences. The problem is that the mean is our balance point. So if we represent the values below the mean with a negative and the values above the mean with a positive, when we add these, we're always going to get 0. So we can't find an average of the differences that way. So our next step to compensate for that would be to square those differences, because whenever you square a number, it's always positive. So 0 squared, well, that's just 0. Negative 1 squared, that's negative 1 times negative 1 is a positive 1. 2 squared is 4. 1 squared is 1. Negative 2 squared, that's negative 2 times negative 2, that's a positive 4. 5 squared is 25. Negative 1 squared is a positive 1. Negative 3 squared is 9. Negative 2 squared is 4. And 1 squared is 1. So I can't find the average of the differences, but I can find the average of the squared differences. We'll call that the variance. To find the average of the squared differences, what we'll do is we'll add those squared differences. And theoretically, we divide by the number of differences. But since we're using what we call a sample, as opposed to a population, we'll divide by the number of values minus 1. All right, so let's take the sum of these squared differences. I get 50. And n stands for the number of values that I have, the number of finishing times. So it's 10 minus 1. So 50 over 9. I get 5.555, repeating 5. I'm going to round it off to 4 places. So this is the average of the square differences. I don't want the square differences, so I'm going to unsquare to take the standard deviation. I'm going to take the square root of the variance. So I'm taking the square root of that 5.5556. It's approximately, that wavy line means approximately 2.4. I rounded it off to the nearest tenth. So on the average, it took students 10 minutes to finish that quiz. The other finishing times differed from 10 by about 2.4 minutes.